Welcome, Storm Lads and Storm Lasses, to the Iron Fist of the Heavens here in the Mortal Realms, because today we are talking about the Stormcast Eternals as an army in our continuing exploration of their battle tome. Now, we've talked about what an individual Stormcast is, how they're made, basically where they end up being reforged and stuff like that, but that's a micro view. When you and I play a game of Age of Sigmar, we take on more of a macro view. That of a general with dozens of those individual stories being told. Rather than the identity of a single Stormcast Eternal, today we're going to look at the identity of the faction, right? How do they fit into the Mortal Realms together? How do they array themselves for battle and organize themselves for murder? And remain this undulled spear tip that the forces of order both need and a little bit fear. So we're going to explore the Stormhosts, the organization, and their relation to other mortal factions. Now, one thing I'd like to add right up top here, if you're interested in this video or in Age of Sigmar in general, please consider using any of the affiliate links in the description below via my link tree. You'll see exactly how much money you save, and every single time you do, at no cost to you, a little bit goes to directly supporting me, my wife, our cats, the whole channel, and I could not be more thankful to each and every one of you. Also, side note, if you want to learn more about playing the Stormcast Eternals on the tabletop, go check out Goonhammer, as they are a great online blog that has tons of resources for playing the game, painting models, model reviews, like the actual building of them, and stuff like that. For those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar or the Stormcast, we actually have a lot of information about how they conduct themselves in the realms, not only from Black Library novels and campaign books, but also from things like Soulbound, which is the Age of Sigmar role-playing game by Cubicle 7. And the perspectives and opinions on the Stormcast really, they run the spectrum, right? From terrified to feeling awe and safe in their arms. And part of that difference in perspective has to do with the individual temperaments, traditions, and methods and morals of the individual Stormcast armies surrounding them. So what I mean by that is mortals who are inundated around the Hallowed Knights, for example, are going to have a different opinion of Stormcast than those that live among the Knights Excelsior. Those are two different Stormhosts of Stormcast, but their cultures, their traditions, everything make them feel very different. So if you're looking for ways to kind of narratively set your faction apart, simply ask the question, what does the average person think about them? So Stormhosts. Well, immediately after being made, hot off the press if you will, a Stormcast is assigned to a Stormhost. In order to disseminate his will and authority across the realms, Sigmar organized his new army into distinct fighting orders that can all operate independently or jointly. If you're a 40k player, think Space Marine chapters. It's just an organizational format, but Stormhosts also exemplify the warriors that are contained within it, and they feel unique to one another as a result. Now, I do plan to do a dedicated video for every single Stormhost that we have access to in this new battle tome, what characters they have, going deeper into their traditions and how they're viewed, but for the purposes of this particular video, I want to keep it brief with an example or two. Essentially, upon being reforged, each soul of a hero is examined, and the Sacrosanct Chamber is really good with their witch sight of looking at a soul and asking the question, what is this warrior good at? What is their strength? Or what makes them unique or sets them apart? Is it their devotion and faith in Sigmar? Is it their ability to rally those who are around them and kind of like stuck in grimness? Is it their ability to rally those around them and basically turn the tide of a battle by inspiration alone? Beyond those things, was there a character trait or an origin that seemed to make them stand out or be different? What those Sacrosanct Chamber people see is essentially what divides up the Stormcasts into Stormhosts. And the way that I think is best to describe this is the idea that a Stormhost focuses on one aspect of heroism like a laser. So for example, the Hallowed Knights make up... So as an example, the Hallowed Knights are made up of heroes who died with a religious dedication to Sigmar. They died fighting in his name or healing the sick in prayer to him and so on. But there's always this undercurrent of orthodoxy, of religious iconography, and reverence permeate every warrior in that Stormhost. Even if, the methods of that worship might have looked different from warrior to warrior in life. This is an example of all of these warriors having a trait that is useful to Sigmar. In this case, religious zeal, incorruptibility, that kind of stuff. Alternatively, another Stormhost is the Anvils of the Heldenhammer, and they're generally bound together by one fact. Their souls were raised from Shyish. These aren't necessarily heroes who died at the tail end of the Age of Myth or during the Age of Chaos. Some of them seem to be from the world that was. Many of them from the Age of Myth that were just swept up to fight against these new horrors that they never saw in their lifetimes. The temperament of the Anvils of the Heldenhammer is grim silence, a lot of reverent silences, and it kind of befits long-quieted souls that were suddenly thrust into modern events. This is an example of the Stormcast being bound by an origin, rather than a temperament. And as we go through the other various Stormhosts, you'll see a few other sources and variations, just different qualities that kind of group them together. So once you're separated by what makes you great, we now have to put you into a place inside of your Stormhost. These all have their own little hierarchical structures. Each one of them has a power structure within, with a Lord Commander to lead it. He, of course, has his coterie of leaders, advisors, war ministers, that kind of stuff. And below him are a series of chambers where the individual units are organized. These are the ones that you and I get to play as. They're organized into chambers, and each one of these chambers has enough warriors and resources to be an army unto themselves. But, they all have their own power structures, their own leadership, their own reinforcements, that kind of stuff. But more than likely, whoever is in charge of an individual mission will be able to take units from just about anywhere. And we'll talk about how that works in a second. From here, our freshly pressed Stormcast Eternal is assigned a role based on their skills. And other older battle tomes would have various Stormcasts, favoring specific units or weapons. That's largely done away with in terms of the game mechanics of having different weapons on your models or whatever. Essentially, what they've kind of done now is that every Stormhost has access to every single chamber. So build whatever you want. It used to be, for example, Celestial Vindicators love to fight with swords. So back when the Liberator kit came with swords, you would always build those for them because it's thematic. Now it's kind of moved away from that kind of rule set to more like, how do you as the individual mission leader want to build your toolbox to achieve success? You have access to everything. How do you do it? Which is real neat. Once you're in a unit, then you're going to get assigned somewhere with your unit. Because you see, the average citizen doesn't see all that stuff happening. They don't see the Stormcast getting made. They don't see the organizational structure, the rites and rituals of inside of a Stormhost, rather. But you know what they do see? The places the Stormcast are stationed at. What the average person sees are the Storm Keeps. In each major city of the Forces of Order is a towering defensive edifice called a Storm Keep, often taking the form of like a jagged tower lined with bastillas and constantly circled by scouts and messengers. And these act as the military outposts, mustering points, and defensive bulwarks, defending anything around them. And they also act as the garrison place for Stormcast Eternals in any major city. Each Storm host can have several Storm Keeps. It used to be in older books that they kind of had a central one, and while it's kind of true that they probably all have a major hub, they've spread far and wide in the era of the Beast, and so many new cities were founded, and each of them needed a hub of protection and reinforcement. This is where the average mortal will interact with a Stormcast, the ones that protect them personally. So again, what kind of reputation do they have with mortals? What kind of Stormkeep do they have? How advanced is the city? These are all questions you can answer with your particular army lore. We are also introduced to a new kind of Stormkeep in this edition called the Bleak Citadels. It's essentially a Stormkeep exclusively used by the Ruination Chamber, who we will cover very soon. My point in saying it is, that's kind of more of a broad term, Stormkeep now. It's more of just a general defensive structure for Stormcast than like their one home base in the mortal realms. But what this means for you and I is that your Stormcast army can have a lot of different themes. For example, they could be Guardians assigned to Hammerhall Akshi that maybe get called away from home because there's a nearby Chaos army they need to deal with. Maybe they traditionally are not stationed somewhere at a Stormkeep, and Sigmar sends them everywhere via lightning, which he can do. He basically like arcs them in through lightning, and then once you're there, you have to walk around. So maybe there is no permanent home. Like these are all things that you can define for yourself, because the storm hosts have so many different ways of fighting and things they need to do. You have the freedom to decide what kind of army you want to make. But the storm keeps are interesting because they really are the fixed structures that most people will interact with. And honestly, they're always cool because whenever a description of a city that has a storm keep happens, it dominates the skyline. Right? This is why I say citizens can see you as scary or as security. You know, is the storm keep this untouchable bastion of order and holiness, or is it this dark slab edifice where malcontents go to get inquisitorially killed? Both of those things can be true. It could be one, the other, or both a little bit, depending on your class and society. I love the book Dominion by Darius Hinks because he highlights that the Stormcast Eternals as a presence are something that the humans kind of fear. It's this perspective of street rats trying to get a better life, and they're trying to like get away from all the things in the city because it scares them to have so many Stormcast around. And that's true. The Knights Excelsior in that story were really scary to be around because they kind of went into the moral extremes example we talked about for their failings. In the book Scaventide by Garen Klolster, it portrays Stormcast as unmitigated heroes because the people that they're interacting with in this story are all about to die, and there's nothing scary about the Stormcast. They're the only hope that they got. So, and again, both are true. Stormkeeps allow us to project whatever presence we want into our slice of the mortal realms, because what units and people interact with, how they adjudicate themselves, how they handle internal disputes, all of those things will dramatically affect the perception and tone of your army. And so speaking of, how do we make an army, right? So we've been assigned to a place, we've been assigned to a unit, maybe assigned to a storm keep, or maybe just held in reserve. How do we fit into the Stormcast Eternals army? Well, the structure goes a little bit something like this. At the top, we have the leadership echelon. This is, again, your highest level of leadership, giving orders, selecting missions, and so on. Below them, we have three big chambers: Warrior, Harbinger, and Exemplar. Each of these can function like an army unto itself, has a whole slew of units within it, but how does that translate into, an army on the tabletop that can take anything with a mishmash of stuff? Well, the answer is that each of those three chambers, those are the main fighting chambers, by the way, they act as an army specializing in something. The warrior chambers are the most numerous and focused on combined arms, taking ground. The Harbinger chamber is focused on swiftness and lightning attacks, literal and figurative. And the Exemplar chamber is focused on small but tanky elite squadrons. All three of those main fighting chambers have access to smaller chambers of the Stormhosts, things like the Vanguard forces, the Extremis, and Ruination chambers. And so if you take the role of, we'll say, a Lord Celestant, that's kind of a basic captain archetype in this army, and you're given a mission, one that your superiors in your chamber think that you'd be best fit for. Thematically, I like the warrior chamber, and so I'll take the units that I need for that job, and maybe when I arrive to the location, a Vanguard scout unit meets up to brief me, and I add them to my force. They're like, hey, there's some natural hindrances we got to work around. I can show you the way. Okay, they get adopted into my army. We make our way there, and I see, oh man, there's a giant wall in my way. Okay, well now as the Lord Celestant, I'm going to call down for Extremis chamber support, and they're going to smash right through that wall. And in that way, you've configured an army. You have your main warrior chamber troops, you have a little smattering of some Vanguard stuff, an Extremis chamber unit, and that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. They have your main fighting chamber add tools to their toolbox that they need to achieve whatever job. Over the course of many books, you'll see that army composition changes because they're adapting to meet different threats, and that's why we can mix units so freely. You're here to do a job. Assemble the toolbox you need to accomplish it and get to work. When the job is done, we can all break apart and go back to what we're doing, right? The Extremis chamber will go somewhere else. The scouts will keep on scouting. I'll be given a new mission, and it just happens over and over again. And so even though there is this very ornate chart that dictates all the different chambers and stuff, it's a very fluid thing. Main three fighting forces broken into several divisions, take what you need, get the job done, come back. Now, as simple as that is, each of those different chambers, the 3 warrior chambers and vanguard and extremists and all that kind of stuff, they all have their own flavor to them. Unique units, unique heroes, ways of doing battle, things that they bring to the table that the others simply do not have. And so over the next few videos, we're going to tackle that specifically, going through chamber by chamber and exploring them. And this is where we're going to get the actual unit lore, because I went through in the battle tome and picked out all the units that are associated with each chamber. We're going to explore each one of them and basically talk about how they fit into the greater faction that is Stormcast Eternals. But the real takeaway from this video is just the idea of when a Stormcast is made, you're assigned to some place by who you are, your deepest identity that was seen by people who can read your soul. You're given a mission. If you're amongst the mortals, you're probably at a storm keep. If you're being held for fighting, you're probably going to be arced down from the heavens. And that you as a hero can build whatever army you want or need to accomplish any goal that's given to you by the God King. How you do that and why you do it are subjects for you to explore, so that basically it'll dictate how people on the ground perceive you. That's why there's parades for the Hallowed Knights and basically Knights of Terror around the Knights Excelsior, because some people have no chill. And so I want to end this video like I end all of them, simply asking the question, why is this cool? Right? It's not a ton more information. We kind of covered storm keeps and some of the organizational stuff. It's not the sexiest lore, but what I will say is that more and more chambers keep coming out, and what it is doing is giving us a better and better snapshot of stories that we want to tell. Like, if you want to make a 2,000 point army on parade or whatever, on paper it's probably just a mishmash of units that you just wanted to paint, and that's rad. But how they all got there can tell a story of this hero who's leading them, and what exactly they think they're up against. And as we explore the different lore for the various units specifically, think about that. Like, if I say a unit is good at fighting monsters and you see it in the story, that means they're expecting to fight something really, really big and really, really gross. They don't take things idly. And this has been a point that I think Black Library traditionally has been pretty good at. When you read a book and they have multiple types of Stormcast heroes, Scaventide, the newest one, being a great example, it has like a prosecutor in there. There's a Lord Veritant, Liberators, Reclusians, a few other units. All of them act differently because they're there for different purposes, and they all have different strengths that they add and abilities. And so over the course of the book, you really get a sense of like, wow, these are all very valuable members of a team. And that's the point. That's how you should feel when you're building your army. So anyway, friends, I would love to hear your thoughts. What is your favorite Storm host? If you leave it in the comments down below, I will pick the most upvoted one. We'll start with that one. I already have the notes done for the rest of the chambers, but nothing for the Storm hosts yet. So I will pick the order that you guys want to see them in, and we'll get there afterwards. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'll catch you all next time. Happy wargaming, friends.